If you get super lucky, then you get a 6 and you get lethal hits. That would be incredibly nice for most orcs in general. Plus it could make that stratagem really good for critical hits on a 5 plus if you went on to use that. Overall still seems very solid indeed, still looks pretty interesting as a frontline damage dealer with quite a lot of threats going on and a big priority for your opponent to try and bring down. The Hunter Rig is its transport equivalent. This mod now does a transport capacity of 21, basically a big beast tiger mod, plus also an attached character if you'd like, and all this beast is just very similar to the Kill Rig beyond that. As with before, it will trade out a few points for lacking the psychic shenanigans of the World Power, and also it won't get you the +1 to strength buff that you get as its secondary power. Otherwise, besides holding a big mob, its only other main thing is that it gets some very safe disembarking. If the units are destroyed while the mob is embarked, each time you roll the transport deals a mortal wound, you get to re-roll any failed result, meaning that you'll often be able to disembark a full 20-man squad and have a solid chance not to lose a model at all. Still better compared with a battle wagon, battle wagon the other units in lead taggers, so you're a little bit less limited there. Most of which are some very similar changes, same stat line. The only major difference between them is the different guns and special rules that they have. They have had a few common changes. They've gone up to toughness 7 and +1 wounds, usually with a 4+ save. Maybe a tiny bit tougher, but won't really change too much against anti-tank weapons, which generally went up in save as well. The other major change for them is they can't be taken in units anymore. Seems that Games Workshop just thought you could spam these a bit too much previously. They did limit the numbers that you could take. They basically all just run around as independent buggies now, so I guess it's quite easy to field them en masse now, seeing as they're not competing for fast attack slots. You could absolutely have an army with like 15 of these in, if you did want to go Mad Max style orcs. For the first one, we've got the Boomdacker Snaz wagon with the mech special with a high rate of fire. The mech special has been amped up a little bit here. It's lost a bit of AP, but into the opponent's weak lines, could be a bit annoying for their shooting. Changes to its profile. The main changes for this one are to the guns. The river cannon gains a little bit of strength but has lost AP. Unfortunately, the burner resource have been toned down really quite a bit. Previously they just gave you 46 shots at strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. Now it's only 2d6 for twin wings. That's the main It doesn't seem that that's limited to infantry or anything like that. We just found a lot of hair of rivets into the biggest, scariest enemy unit that the opponent has. Make a big Terminator squad hit on one word, or something big like an Imperial Knight ideally. The Ruckchuck Squig Buggy is still basically the all-round. Previously it had to do with squig launchers that make big normally, but it does have special rules to use that to infantry, the unit, and then it have them
Wow.
but not much good for other things. On average, each one of these lands around about 3 hits at that profile against infantry. It's not going to be taken down entirely by itself. Otherwise, I do quite like the profile of Quick Mine on this one. Once per battle at the start of any phase, roll the dice on a 4+. The enemy unit within 3 inches of this thing takes d6 mortal wounds. It is a bit random, but it's quite fun that that's basically anti-charge threat there. Use this at the start of the fight phase after your opponent's just charged. The enemy unit before it gets taken down. Teleporting part. This one's got a shot rifle. It's actually only got 1 shot rather than 4. It does definitely cut the damage out. But in a bit of exchange for that, it's going to be devastating wounds keyword. Any wound roll is pretty big. It's also using precision as well. So basically, sniper weapon in their arsenal. Something that they didn't really have in their before. So I guess that's kind of nice. Still though, even hitting on a quite punchy profile, it's going to be pretty swift. swingy. Either you're going to get that big wound through or not. The characters with good invul saves will just re-roll that with a command point re-roll if they are very scared of it. Still seems very fun though. Otherwise, it still has its ability to teleport. Each time the model advances, then you get to redeploy anyone. I guess if you're in the war, you could potentially use that to and then declare a charge afterwards. That would be kind of fun and disruptive. The bog is besides being a person water type, these guys work perhaps the pick of the bunch and the raw damage dealing, so that they're quite bit of an effort to put them on a bit more power with the others, and they don't do quite as much damage with the rockets now. The rocket cannon can have +1 attack, the wing missiles, they no longer get a +1 to hit against vehicles. The twin big shooters have also been toned down a little bit, not getting double the shots and trading that out for twin links. Finally, the nose drill has also been nerfed a bit as well. It's now a lot more on par with what the other ones can do in combat. Strength 8, AP -1 and damage 2. Not no threats, but not quite as much as it was. It does still get some nice mortal wound impact hits though. If it makes a charge then on a 2 to 5, then the enemy suffers D3 mortal wounds, and on a 6 it's 3. Still looks like it's probably the biggest and heaviest damage dealer out of the various different boggies though. A fair bit of damage to be shooting and charges harder than most. The Norts both have a transport 20 wounds, a 3+ save and a 6+ invulnerable. The toughness has gone up decently, and I feel like there'll be more weapons that are wounding them on a 5 than before, though they have lost a few wounds. Otherwise, objective control 8 is pretty decent, but they do have that terrorist keyword. So as basically their the weapons and shooters unchanged, all lose a little bit of AP, but still hits for a special rule to get +1 to hit. I feel like so far its stat line for the points has been kind of underwhelming throughout ever since it came out. Who knows, maybe Games Workshop might be kind to it with the points in 10th edition. Otherwise for the Morkanors, basically most of the profile is pretty much exactly the same as the Gorkanors. The main changes are that instead of the big shooter, it gets a Mega Zapper, D6 +3 shots that damage D6 there, and it also trades out a little bit of melee, only having 4 attacks with a claw or more, or getting a better invulnerable save on a 5+. Looks like it no longer has an aura of custom force field effect though. It won't affect anything nearby, just the walker itself. Otherwise, unlike the Gorkanaut, it gets a +1 to hit in the war at range. That's actually kind of big on the big custom Mega Zapper. If you go from hitting on a 5+ to hitting on a 4, that's going to be a whole load of extra damage. Finally, for the Orc Super Heavies, we've got the Stomper. Toughness 14 and 30 wounds with a 2+ save. They're not really messing around with the raw stats here. Objective control 12 is really quite decent. Target on an objective, you get a sword to take it away from it. Again, in terms of raw damage output, there's no enormous changes here from 9th edition really. The Death Cannon's still very good against tanks. 3d6 shots at strength 14 and damage d6, though an Orky ballistic skill does mean that you're not hitting with many of those. It's got the Super Gatler for 20 shots at strength 7 and damage 2, very good for mowing down a few things there. Strength 24, 8 and damage 10, usually a profile that will happily just destroy the Imperial Knight then and there. Fielding one of these is basically mandatory to include a mech. The mini-mech now gives this thing a +1 to hit for a command phase buff, and that's kind of ridiculous given how many big scary guns it can field. Otherwise, it's still a war effigy, giving you a +1 to your battle shock tests, has the same movement restrictions as the last one, and can even move over things that are monsters and vehicles, just not Titanic, though realistically, with the enormous size of this thing, with a 10-inch move it might struggle to clear them. If you do roll a 6 for the explosion as well, it's going off in a 2d6 mortal wounds, which is kind of cool. Again, I'd be very surprised if this thing winds up being competitive in any way, shape or form. Games Workshop does not have a bit of a history of hitting it kind of niche, so the best way to play it is this one has a transport capacity of 12 and again the 12 keywords. The defense side has been boosted to toughness 8, so it gets this little bit of like overcharged plasma. Let's swap this side on damage and now for the bottom save again. Again, riggers though, banging it back together. Seems like it should be interesting enough for zooming boys onto points with the new transport rules. It's a way that you can move and disembark now, that will stop you charging in the same turn. Transport-based order is probably going to be usable, given the points to deliver the boys to melee in tap, which is usually fairly efficient for that sort of thing, being nice and focused and kind of no frills. You're basically paying for the speed and durability and not really much else. Will be kind of a shame that truck boys has gone away though. That was a very nice way of getting a unit of boys a surprisingly long distance across the battlefield. Orky Flyers next, and I'd say for the most part Games Workshop hasn't been too kind to these. The new fly rules probably don't help so far. None of them have the other keywords, so and then from there they get a lot more. At the end of the turn, they have gone up in top of 9. The Boss Bomb Blaster Jet was definitely one of the terrors of the air in 9th edition, particularly with those teleport blasters with the massive damage. It still definitely looks threatening, though maybe a little bit less so than before perhaps. Most of its attacks lost AP, maybe not too unusual for 10th edition. A bunch of its weapons got handed twin linked as well, rather than double the shots, which I think is generally going to be a downgrade. And for some reason the teleport blasters lost a bit of accuracy as well. Everything else hits on a 4+, as it's a mech flying the plane, but the teleport blasters don't and only hits on a 5+, so usually only the one hit out of those now. It did get a small down boost against one. Hopefully as a result it still costs a decent amount less now. I certainly feel like it's a bit less terrifying to enemy armour and just hoovering it off the board. Otherwise, it just gives you a 4+ monster page, and the Voidigo upgrades to a fortune power back as well, so even this thing comes down a bit, and less the supporting thing about the bombers I think is the power of the bombs. Other flyers in 40k still seem to have at least fairly dangerous bombs, but the burner bomber just rolls a single d6 per each model in the target unit, and you need a 6 to deal a mortal wound to them. On squads of 10 that's usually going to be 1 or 2, and even on big squads of 20 that's only going up to 3 or 4. What's worse is that due to starting in strategic reserve, it means that you're not dropping that bomb until 23 early. It's just kind of bad all round. It's really not too much better for the Blitzer bomber either. The only real big difference for this one For losing all those shots though, it has picked up quite a nice upgrade with the Daka Storm. It basically gets sustained hits, and those sustained hits go off on a 5+ as well. I feel like between those two rules it does do enough to compensate them for the lost damage for the extra shots. Overall I feel like it works out around about similar to what it was, maybe even a little bit better against harder targets. I guess this one and the Wasp Bomb are probably going to be the ones that are most likely to be good, but without any other buffing rules like Speed War, they might have to be a little bit cheaper to justify themselves. Next we've got a couple of Orky fortifications. The first one's the Big Head Boss Bunker. This one transports 12 and is now a toughness 10 bunker that you set up in your own deployment zone. So it's gained a bit of toughness from T8 as it was before. Kind of a bit sad that you can't a 4+ save and 10 wounds, so perhaps isn't super hard to kill. This one's got similar sort of rules to the boss bunker. Basically, it gives you cover if you're partially obscured by it, plus it's got fortification engagement range rules, which means that working in tandem and leading all the squads. He can only lead mobs and boys though. He's locked out of really quite a lot of units. He can't run around with looters or burners, for example. Stat line wise, he's dropped down to toughness 5, maybe to fit in with the same toughness profile as the Nob squad, and he does have a 6+ leadership rather than a 7+, so it does mean that will actually protect the mob a little bit against battle. On last his power score, lost a little bit of HP, only 4 attacks with one of
God. Damn, it hurts. Ooh, damn.
They really want a leader in the unit to be -1 to wound. If you want a war boss to lead the Mega Nobs around, then you can take the Mega Armored war boss. Instead, just going to really lose out to the big Mega Armor, as we'll see in a second. Otherwise, though, the Mega Boss is more raw violence. The usual drop has strength 12, hits on a 2+, with lots of attack. It also lost on AP like most melee weapons. Otherwise, he's got the same +1 to hit for a unit, maybe particularly relevant on Mega Nobs. The special rule is that when you hold the war until the start of the next battle round, the model gets the ability. Definitely not the worst on a big tanky model, but I feel like most of the time he's generally going to be running around with the Mega Nobs, so he won't get to use the defensive profile unless his bodyguards have all been shot down. Overall, I feel like the big mech is probably going to add more, as we'll get onto in just a second. Otherwise, for bosses though, we've also got the Beast bosses. The Beast boss on foot is very similar to the Orc War boss on foot. He's got the option of the Beast Chopper and the Power Claw. Having both on the same model, it does make him a bit more flexible and generalist compared with the War boss. So
6? Holy shit.
Attack profile each time he fights. The Beast Chopper has a bit less strength but more attacks compared with the regular War boss, and both of the profiles always wound vehicles and monsters on foot. Otherwise, compared with the War boss, he has a 6+ feel no pain, as well as the +1 to hit, special rules will beat his range. Each time he makes a charge move, then until the end of the turn, the melee weapons he's holding gets devastating wounds. Really very nice with anti-vehicle and anti-monster. That will be a massive amount of wounds to those targets. He doesn't get the big attack drop in the war though, and he does lose out on a little bit of shooting and attack squig attacks. He can't lead Nobs as well, which I guess will be another downside. Otherwise, one of the units that seems to have changed the most is the Beast boss on the Squigosaur. The most notable change to this guy is that enemy anti-tank weapons are just going to be able to directly target him if he's out in the open. He's mounted, he's got the monster keyword, he's not allowed to attach to Squighog boys, which the unit that I guessed he would have led. Now he's basically just a solo monster on his own, running around and doing his own thing. Probably as a result of that, they've decided that they needed to massively increase his durability. A save of a 3+ and 9 wounds, and most importantly, not -10 damage, just like no pain type save. That basically doubles his durability from what you might expect. It's really 18 wounds compared with if he didn't have that rule. Overall, he does look very, very durable, so I guess he needs to be on quite a valuable model. Otherwise, his combat profile is looking at somewhat. It's pretty short, but deal devastating wounds on a 6, so that's kind of fun. And otherwise, it has a 1 CP heroic intervention stratagem to potentially support units nearby. And he's got an aura of rerolls for nearby beast snaggers charges, just a little bit of a help to get them towards combat, might save you a command point or 2 there. In general though, I don't really think he's all that great in terms of supporting units. He really just is a big top monster to throw towards the end, just a bit of a different Next up, we've got the Death Killer War Tribe. This speed boss now can attach to a unit of war bites, and generally adds a bit of combat threat to the unit, and a bit of close range shooting with some kill depth wounds, which then makes it a little bit less good than it used to be though. Stagger score across the rerolls, which leaves you with the war bites for the during the war to get to about 6 inches, so I guess that would be an 18-inch move, and then that's a big tough model with 9 wounds as well. He does seem kind of Next up, and perhaps arguably one of the most improved units in the entire codex, is the big mech in Mega Armor. Wasn't really expecting this, but this guy seems to basically be an orky apothecary on your Mega Knights now. Unlike the Wasbomb plane, and apparently the shock attack gun if it's standing still, he's going to be hitting a bit worse with shooting. Previously they hit on a 4+, and now it's back to a 5 again. Can't even trust the mechanic orcs to shoot straight apparently. Otherwise though, he gives you a reroll once to hit for the Mega Knobs, and I guess that would help his own shooting profile for whichever weapons he chooses to take. Though really what he brings to the Mega Knob unit I think is all about durability, and he just helps them out on all sorts of different levels. First up, and perhaps the biggest, he gets to revive one same model with a 4 per turn. This is rather than killing vehicles, you will now pick up your Mega Knob to get them back in the fight. That's really quite a big deal, adding a big valuable model to the mob each turn is nice in itself, and also could be handy for getting a shorter charge off, setting it up at the front of the unit. Then if you pick up the custom force field instead of the teleport blaster, it gives you a 4+ invulnerable save against ranged attacks. Very, very nice on Mega Knobs, seeing as they're often going to be eating anti-tank fire. Like the Morkanaut, this one no longer gives you an aura of 6+ cluster in its own right anyway. Across all the keep that to the theme of healing even further himself, he gets a D3 lost wounds once per game. Not too bad to regenerate a model and also heal up a damaged one. Overall, I feel like between that and his admittedly decent enough melee profile with his extra kill saw, plus a bit of extra shooting, looks like a really good model to add to the unit I think. I can't help but think he's just going to add a fair bit more value than a war boss does. Otherwise for the mechs, we've got the big mech with a custom force field. He's quite restricted in terms of which units that he can lead. You can go in boys, burner boys, tank busters, looters or knobs. He's a slightly weaker version of the custom force field, as it's on a 5+ rather than a 4+. Though once per game he gets to overcharge to a 4+, and his grot assistant allows an extra overcharge, so I guess potentially that's 2 different turns of 4+ invul. I guess it could well be worth using one of those turns on the same turn as the War, as otherwise he's not really doing anything that the War wouldn't do anyway, as that gives you the 5+ invulnerable save anyway. Otherwise he also gives you reroll hit rolls of 1 up, kind of underwhelming for the vast majority of these, and perhaps sadly particularly for the burners, as they don't have a hit reroll. Out of these, the only unit that would really be all that bothered about the range damage output would probably be the looters. I guess if they do wind up being really, really cheap, maybe you could justify this guy in a unit with them, keep it a little bit safer rather than just one. Got the crazy stop and fire across attack gun. This one was one of the terrors of 8th edition. Give that definitely very lackluster in this. Though perhaps this profile does look a little bit more threatening. D6 +1 attack, and 9 HP. Which will help out with a few more shots. Seems like okay anti-elite damage, maybe not super exciting against tank quality. Like the other mech, it seems like he gives the secured a reroll hit rolls of 1, which he himself will be able to use. As well as the raw damage, he gets to hand out a battle shock test for deranged snotlings materializing within the brains of the opponents. That can be unsettle you, I guess. And once per game, his particular grot assistant allows you to roll the dice wherever you get unlucky and roll that low 1. Overall, I guess still could be interesting enough. I've found interesting enough units to sit in a Lucius mob, being basically just direct extra firepower though. On whether or not it's worth it for the points, or whether it's really up to scratch versus all the other firepower that you can see. For next, we have the mini mech. Again, this guy's got quite deep restricted units. Voice looters, mech guns, knobs, or tank busters. Kind of interesting that you can join the guns there. And otherwise, if you'd like, it would be a lone operative near vehicles. If he stays within 3 inches of them, he can't be shot outside of 12. That's why he's getting the wound, so he's actually a bit more on par with the big mechs now. And his special rule, rather than giving you hit rerolls or anything like that, is that he gives a +1 to hit and +3 wounds on one vehicle per turn. Generally, this is really quite a nice buff, I think. A +1 to hit is kind of huge for Orky ballistic skill of a 5+. Unless this guy's incredibly expensive, he's basically auto-include if you use a stomper with those crazy big guns, and seems like it could be on paper pretty interesting for Battle Wagon's kill cannon with those d6+3 shots, or the Gorkanaut or the Morkanaut with their shooting. I guess with mediocre other things that he does, he will remain kind of cheap. If any more ranged threats are actually really quite efficient in the Orc army, then he could be an almost auto-include choice to buff some of them. Orky Psychers next, and we have the Weird Boy and the Word Boy. Out of the two, I think I still prefer the Weird Boy, who has that jump. He can only lead boys though, so unfortunately no hopping around for other units, much as it would have been fun to jump around and burning people with burner boys or something. This is also his own unit as well, so he can't cast it on another Orky squad nearby. That definitely does limit its utility compared with what it was. The opponent doesn't have any way to deny it or anything like that, and otherwise his secondary attack is Headbanger, basically another way that you can snipe things with Orc. Just a single shot that hits on a 4+ with strength 6, 80 -3 and damage 1. But then the fun buff that it gets is that you get an extra pip of strength and damage for every 5 models in the squad. In theory, it is leading a 24 units that will go up to strength 10, AP 3 and a big damage of 5. Definitely has the potential to snipe some characters there, but hitting on a 4+ is kind of unreliable. I'm not sure you could really justify building out that many boys just literally for this spell. Still though, just dropping 20 boys onto the battlefield anywhere does seem kind of good. Looks like you could even combine that with that strap as well for charge. So you could and then have a 7-inch charge on your opponent and deep strike. Very reliable reroll. I do quite like the way as well that the Orky Psychers also have deadly demise. When you kill one of these, there's at least a small chance that they're just going to blow up in your face and shower everyone around with D3 mortal wounds. If he's not standing on top of a word tower, then he can lead some beast snagger boys, and his main damage dealer is the Eyes and More. Starts out with D6 shots, hitting on a 5+, strength 8, AP 3 and damage 2. Every time they use it, you get 2 shots. So again, it goes on to D6 8 shots, 20 models strong. So it does only average around about 4 hits on the opponent. Not bad, but I'm entirely convinced that it's necessarily worth it for the Eyes and More and nothing else. Otherwise, the second debuff he gets is a big battle shock debuff that's declared in the opponent's command phase. You roll a dice and on a 2+, you avoid mortal wounds, and then you can debuff one of your opponent's units and on a -2 a battle shock. Quite a disruptive thing. Either you want battle shock to be happening in your opponent's command phase, then they can be able to fall back. The other debuffs come into play quite a lot more, like not being able to hold objectives. That does seem like really quite a big ability, but again I still feel like it's kind of situational. You are basically counting on making sure your opponent's unit is below half strength, but also you haven't been able to kill it. Overall I definitely feel like it's with a +2-inch charge. Same boss and the regular boss. Same boss and the beast snagger. You can only lead these boys, and gives them a 5+ build and aim to make the unit really quite here. They do already have 6 so it's maybe not quite as big as getting a 5+ from nothing. Still at the base of the unit, we'll get charged by the not to get a damage 1. kind of a bit disappointing that he can't beat the Squid Hog boys. I thought that might have been kind of fun. I believe he had some lore with his great big bounding legs that meant he was able to keep up with them. Kind of wonder if that might have been a keyword thing that prevents him from doing that with them. He'd weirdly have a unit that's part infantry and part mounted. Otherwise, you've got a couple of other healing shenanigans, as well as a fairly decent bit of melee with anti-vehicle. Once per game, he can heal D3 models in the squad with his Grot Orderly, and then once per turn as well, he can also heal a Beast Dragon character for 3 wounds. That one seems pretty much destined to go on the Beast boss on the Squigosaur, I think. Those things would look absolutely terrifying with that great defensive profile, and then casually regrowing a bunch of wounds with this guy souping them up. Overall, I feel like it does look pretty interesting. Extra durability on your orcs is generally a good thing, particularly when they have a 5+ regular save now, and I think he looks extra tempting alongside a Squigosaur. Otherwise, your more standard Pain Boy can lead either boys, knobs, looters, burner boys or tank busters. He again gives them a 5+ feel no pain type save, and I'd argue that that would go further on these guys, as these guys don't have a 6+ feel no pain to start with. A big squad of boys looks like pretty excellent value to me. Seems quite nice in a knob squad as well, given that they want a character to make them -1 to wound, and a 5+ feel no pain is really good on 2 wound models, protects them against damage 2 shots well as well. Otherwise, you've got a power claw, and really can't a syringe as well. This one you just get a single extra attack with anti-infantry and precision. If you are fighting against infantry and then you get a critical wound, get a 4+ there or 6+ against other things, then the affected unit gets D6 mortal wounds on them. Pretty crazy damage buff for just a throwaway extra attack. You could very easily get that against infantry. Pretty crazy thinking that you could just jab one Skitari or Battle Sister or something, and then cause D6 mortal wounds to the rest of the squad. Otherwise, again with the paint boss, you can also throw D3 models once again with Grot Orderly. I feel like he is a pretty interesting choice just to amp up the raw durability and raw might of boys or knobs. Extra toughness is great for an orc army, and he does chip in with a decent amount of his own melee and that scary anti-infantry attack too. The Orc Banner's next. The Knob with the War Banner can go in either a boys squad or a knob squad. That does mean that the War Banner itself the reason for the profile of it as a basic holding it with a power point, besides boss and nice and critical, makes it good for your unit to just at the start of the battle round. The extra damage, that makes with the bigger damage. We've got the Knob on Splasher Squig, finally able to actually lead the Squig Hog boys and actually do something to make them a bit better in combat. From them before, despite clearly being the squad leader in the box they're sold in. Individually, he's a bit more durable. He's gone up to toughness 7 from toughness 6, and also gained a rather good 5+ feel no pain save as well. Definitely going to take quite a lot of bolt fire and things to bring him down with the 5 wounds and that boost. For what he brings to the unit, he gives them a +1 to hit in melee for them. Kind of handy, I guess, seeing as they can't have a war boss join them for that. His big chopper has the in general, they seem like quite a lot of units for blocking the beast boys, which gives them a decent unit to be fighting around in combat. I do think it's a bit difficult here. Ludicrously tough, as the enemy could fire at him with big guns. and he even had one of those damage cap mechanics that meant that he couldn't lose more than 4 wounds per phase. Now though, maybe not too dissimilar from Abaddon the Despoiler, he just works very, very differently. Kind of a bit surprising. I guess he can hide quite well in a squad now though, and also has Makari's help for a little bit of extra durability. Makari's now basically built into his units, he uses very lucky ways, the same bunch of attacks that usually kill a normal collection. He has a 2+ invulnerable save, though kind of similar to a Makari Archon Shadow skill. He's not allowed to reroll it, and only if it's 1 wound he basically dies when it goes. Otherwise though, his damage remains truly immense. Corpse Claw has 6 attacks at strength 14 and damage 4, though it doesn't degrade upwards now. In terms of what he actually gives for the orcs, it gives them a unit that is leaving, plus 1 to wound being particularly nice. In the mark, gives orcs nearby lethal hits as well. A good time to crack out that stratagem which gets you critical hits on a 5+, and between all that he's definitely going to make the orcs nearby him really quite a lot more violent. It is kind of interesting that he can still ride in a battle wagon or stomper now. Technically still a truck, but that feels like it's probably an oversight. He takes up the space of 18 models, so I guess there's not really any other room for other units to ride with him. I guess Makari would still count as 1, and that would just stop him taking a Megalon guard. Overall, going to definitely have a bit of a different feel there. I guess the way to use him would probably be on foot with a big squad of Megalons, attempt a rear army to give the damage rolls to one of the nearby mortal combat. Next we've got the new incarnation of Boss Snickrot with his commando melee. He's had a lot of changes similar to the commandos, no longer a boosted save, but he does get stealth, -1 toughness to toughness 5, but he's got a 5+ regular armor save, which could be relevant in cover. Morg's Teeth have lost a little bit of AP, down from AP2 to AP1, but overall I feel like they should be a bit more threatening. They've gained twin links at the cost of no attacks, so get to re-roll the wound roll. They also have precision as well, so if your opponent's unit has characters in it, he's got a reasonable chance to try and carve them out of them. Otherwise he gives the commandos the benefit of cover even if they're right out in the open. A bit more meaningful now they've got a 5+ save, and his special leadership trick is that once in the game, in your movement phase, he can basically teleport his units to somewhere else on the board, setting up greater than 9 inches horizontally from enemy models, potentially somewhere quite disruptive for your opponent. I can't help but think though that that rule seems just a little bit at odds with his infiltrators type rule. He can already set up in the midfield, so his on-game board position is probably quite valuable already. It just might not be all that much value in it swapping it out for a deep strike. I suppose he could pull off some weird boy +2 to charge shenanigans like that jump, I guess. Could be an interesting way of getting deep strike turn 1 in another way to the weird boy. Otherwise though, he's lost his leadership debuff, which is a bit sad in the age of battle shock. He's lost his +2 to saving cover and a +1 to wound near terrain. That's a bit of a side grade overall, but at least his own personal melee is looking a bit more threatening. Next up we've got the clawed bionic horror that is Zagstruck. Moves 12 inches alongside his Storm Boys, and potentially really quite a big threat range with them, what with their advanced and charge shenanigans. He's still got quite a meaty profile, 6 wounds at toughness 5 with a 5+ invul, and though he still has a feel no pain type save, it has been reduced slightly, going down to a 6.5. I think it's quite nice to see that he actually does something for his Storm Boy's damage output now. Previously he mainly fell on his raw damage output himself, which wasn't too bad, but now with him the Storm Boys add 1 to his roll, and he also chipped him with the Vulture's Claws with 6 attacks at strength 8 and damage 2. If you do decide to deep strike him, which I'm not sure is necessarily the best idea with his good movement, he does at least get 2 B-roll charge rolls every turn that he comes in. So I suppose with a 9-inch charge that's around that +1 chance to get into combat. Maybe not the worst odds, I can drop it somewhere with a smoke that you just get immediately run down by the enemy. Overall does look solidly usable, definitely something that the Storm Boys would like, provided the force cost is right. Next up, Zogrod Wartsnagger can be Gretchen. He's the character Bunter with the mad hair. He's been a bit tankier on his profile with 6+ Wartsnaggers. He also gained an extra attack to grab that profile. Agency on damage to already isn't too bad melee threat at all. Previously, in the 9th edition codex, I felt kind of disappointed by just how greedy his Super Gretchen were. His lore was basically breeds and games Gretchen and implemented his own profile. This had to go with his previous data sheet, where he basically just didn't really do any buffs to them. Now though, Super runs really are super. They get scout standard, the big body straight away, you can open up with 20 bodies if you want. They get +1 to hit and wound with their attacks, admittedly either strength 2 or strength 3, so not all that much. -1 to wound against them, which again is still going to be wounded easily on a toughness of 2, and they also get a +6-inch movement during the war, so they move even faster than the regular boys. Realistically, I'd be kind of surprised if they're any sort of decent damage dealing stuff. AP0 still means that they wouldn't be doing much against anything but light infantry, which if they can find some suitable targets, looks like they wouldn't do too bad. They would do have a whole bunch of great just move midfield right from the start of the game, particularly ones that are just a little bit harder to kill. There could be quite a lot of depth and more on objectives. Next up, we've got more these boss on a Squigosaur and a Snakebite character. Broadly speaking, he's just a slightly upgraded version of the beast boss on a Squigosaur, maybe a little bit more focused on personal combat stats. His defensive profile is fairly similar. He also has the 4+ feel no pain, toughness 10 and 9 wounds. He does get a 4+ invulnerable save though, which I think is quite big with that kind of defensive profile. Otherwise he gets better melee, big chomper, his unique squig gets damage 4 on those big attacks. Plus he even gets critical wounds on a 5+ for the devastating wounds on the charge as well, so a good chance of 4 mortal wounds there. His Gut Ripper attacks strike at damage 3, so a lot more punchy than the standard squig boss there. He's got a special rule called the bigger they is, the harder they fall. If you're fighting against monsters and vehicles, then you get a +1 to your damage characteristics, and it's really quite big on big compass jaws there. That could be the potential for classic mortal wounds, all very nice if it wants to take down a really big prey. Definitely seems interesting versus the regular squig boss, provided the points premium that he pays isn't too steep. The bad boss give it better as well. I think the start of his profile was just really underwhelming. The Ripper was almost barely worth overcharging, but he's doing about as much damage to him as he did at the end. Those are the changes Hazard's rule, it is a bit better. It's definitely a bit less focused on not making it feel like he's rolling down to the wall. And he doesn't have one re-rolling, he's rolling Reddit 1 and just taking 3 special wounds. In general, the upgraded profile is probably worth it though, because of this base, mainly because of the rules you can use with the basket and the BDA unit to get to re-roll and roll in the range. It's a massively powerful rule to make the flash gets better, so as well as on a 4+ at best. Now, even harder than that on 5. The upgrading comes with another bonus special rule that's kind of dead very ammo given -1 to enemy infantry units nearby. Almost feels like contagions of Nurgle but for Mr. Bad Luck there. This will make it be a bit easier to line up with your natural. Quite nice to see that natural boss that really seems very new on the region. The previous reroll one was particularly exciting. Regular pinball, and rather than either reviving slain models or getting a bonus attack with a syringe, he instead has the option to allow units on either boys or knobs, I suppose. I'm not really sure whether or not orderly, with a chance to maybe restore decreased slain knobs to the unit. That does seem very powerful. Overall, plenty of interesting stuff for the Orphan characters, I think. A lot of them do have a bit more of a niche than they had before, maybe. I do quite like the way it does that, but boys now. It's quite tempting. The duo upgrades of the boy, the Mega Arm, and interesting for that point. Perhaps the Weird Boy could be kind of units around the board. Possibly charged with the strategy with some reliable. With the characters talked about, that looks like that brings us to the end of our summary of Index Orcs for Warhammer 40k 10th edition. Overall, I feel like there's some good stuff here, some things that are a bit more underwhelming maybe. I think that boys on foot will look quite nice with 6-inch movement and 5+ armor carrying. Red Solo can kind of fun pass on objectives, and armor can command points, plus have people who want to reject it and stuff. I feel like little specialist boys like Commando and Storm Boys are still going to be very interesting indeed. Here's a vehicle base sheet, while sounding like they're amazing too. 5 in particular I think is kind of underwhelming. I'd be sort of surprised if the Gorkanaut and Stomper wound up being anywhere near for that kind of thing. Obviously when you get 20 the only way
Oh, man.
I'm sure I'll follow this up with a tier list of orc units at some stage. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, but I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that link in the video description below if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons are what allow me to keep on making big videos like this,